Hey guys, this is Mikro. This is going to be kind of a long one, but I wanted to kind of summarize season one and how it went from JT6, as well as some takeaways as the New World League event as a whole. I think the event has overall been positive, but there are definitely some things that are present within the event that would make me not want to do another season of New World League until those things were fixed. Some of those are on AGS's side, some of those are on the event side, but I wanted to kind of get into the all those details today. In terms of like what went well for us as Joe Team 6, I think people genuinely had a good time. Like there was a pretty good sense of the community. People were active in Discord till the last day. People are still active in Discord even though that it's over. We found some hidden gems. Those hidden gems have been like kind of scouted slash picked up on a multitude of servers, which is very interesting and kind of fun. Leadership put in a lot of time and effort. We didn't have leadership that kind of half-assed it. The pushes actually got done. There were a lot of companies that disbanded over not wanting to push. To be honest, I thought that we might do that too at a certain point because there was so much pushing involved. But we finished the last war without disbanding, so that was great. And there was no like kind of major gear gap for us. There was no alt gap. It was just kind of a gameplay slash how our philosophy was implemented gap. There were some things within this event that I didn't think were preventable that kind of led to most of our downfall, but there are some other stuff as well that was related to like how we ran the company that I think was not ideal. In terms of things I didn't think were super preventable, our company was kind of notorious for having a lot of absences and DCs. We consistently missed about a fifth of our roster that we originally wanted, due to kind of random silly reasons that did not feel really preventable in hindsight, and in foresight maybe could have been prevented if we had more people on standby, but people didn't want to be on standby because they didn't want to be on the New World League for more than they had to, because the server queues for OPR just were not popping compared to live. And in general, it feels like the PvP in this game's kind of in a stale or slower spot. That being said, the OPRs at first were very, very fun. So it's just like once those queues kind of died down and people got tired of waiting for 20 to 30 minutes for each match, that's when it kind of started all going south to a degree. Pe- so people just like would sign up, like for the beginning of the event, people signed up saying that they would make every single war, and then they just made zero of the wars because some people were working weekends and are like, oh, I didn't realize that the event was on the weekends when it was like the schedule was literally laid out for the event being in weekends, and they checked the box saying that they'd be there all the time, and that was like the most infuriating thing I've ever kind of dealt with because we wasted like below round 20 picks on people that just could not make any of the wars. And there's nothing that we can get from it because they didn't drop out of the event. They decided to stay in the event even though that they couldn't play in the event, which meant that we couldn't get that spot for someone else, which is honestly just pisses me off. And I think those players should be banned from future events personally. But if there are future events, but it's just like you just cannot be doing that for this kind of thing. It's just so stupid and infuriating. Some people just didn't show up when the wars would happen. Like this is pretty normal for New World at this point. But a war pulls and you have about 30 people in the roster. The next 10 minutes are spent getting 20 people to sign up, and then the last 5 minutes are going over raid plan. And that was pretty consistent with us as well. It's just there were some days where there was kind of situations thrown at you that it felt like uh you could not fix them. Like you could not turn it into like a winning situation for you. Like there are days where we'd be missing 7 to 8 like starting healers. Like that happened a few times, and then we just got completely and utterly rolled. Uh, and then there's trash talk slash banter after, which is always great. But it's like, what do you do if you're missing 7 to 8 healers? We're debating putting people off roles on healers. We're having our better players have to fill off roles, which they're not as good at, so they're not going to be carrying as hard, and we just have to do that because they're the only players flexible enough to be able to do it. So it's like it's just stupid, and I don't know what could really be done about it. But that happened a lot. People would DC right as the war would start, and this is kind of due to the New World just being New World. Like in our last like real war, immediately when the war started, we had like 2 to 3 people. I think it might have been 3 to 4, honestly, that just DC'd.
A few of those were healers. We lost our point melee. We got utterly rolled in the last war, and people are like, why did Joe Team 6 get rolled? It's like we got rolled because we were missing healers, so we effectively missed your entire group if you miss a healer. You're missing a point melee, which is really, really bad. So they're able to like kind of take space for free on B with only 2 point melee. And we had 4 IGVGs at one point. We had one guy off roll on the melee because he rolled a melee set for at some point for fun in OPR. So it was just kind of a nightmare overall when those situations would happen. It was very hard to fill players. You can't backfill like into a war right now like super effectively. And there were bugs with healing and all this other stuff. So it's like every time you're moving players in and out, you're risking like a group basically not being able to function. It's hard to also fill players because people just naturally aren't on the server. I've kind of talked about that a bit, but if you're on a separate client, you're not gonna want to boot up New World and just get on to fill out an award slot. There were some things that were like utterly miserable. The duration of the event like definitely felt too long to me. I don't think there's like a structure that works like perfectly for this event because if you want to have like the whole like mirror the World Cup, you have a group stage, then you go into your like kind of round robin if or like you go from your round robin into your other like mini group and then from there you go into your mini group for the finals, which kind of makes sense. I don't think that really works for this event because it's just too long and pushing is just way too miserable. In my opinion, I think that everything for the post season should just be completely cut and it should just be purely based off the round robin who wins and loses. My reasoning for that is this event is for newer players and newer players will not get to play in the playoffs slash round robin, and that's more of a thing. This is like, hey, it's competitive. We have this like kind of tournament thing at the end. Isn't that cool? Where everyone's facing against each other, but no one wants to push for that. Like it's just way too much pushing. Like in order to have that like post-season like event, you have to be able to push. If someone wins on their push, then the defender has to re-push, take the territory back, so that the next player could their next team can also attack them. Like it's just way, way, way too much pushing for that to even be possible. In my opinion, it should purely be a round robin or it should be something like whoever gets the most territories at the end of the event like wins or something like that, and the teams that get knocked out just get like I don't know how that would work, but it cannot be like this postseason finanza. I just do not think it favors the newer players to the community enough for it to be work whatsoever. If you lose on defense, you're basically heavily, heavily punished from the event. And you have to push a lot more, and that just kind of leads to burnout. And on top of that, those companies are generally losing, and it just makes people like not want to play the game, which I imagine is also what happens on live servers a lot because that's what used to happen. But before people would just roll to a new server and it'd be like, okay, now we're on a fresh playing ground. Everyone's at ground zero versus that just doesn't happen anymore. There's no like territory reset mechanic or anything like that, so it's just kind of brutal. Wars are definitely going into like some like general takeaways from this event. Wars were definitely won by the bottom 25, not the top 25. So the leadership should be prioritized heavily in the draft. Uh, Naomi was the best pick of the draft by far. Like even from like a rank, like if Naomi went round one, that like Naomi should have went round one, draft number one. Like it's not even close. But Naomi slips to round 30 because Naomi isn't on the actual draft sheet, and someone just picked up Naomi. Uh, for some because she wasn't on the draft sheet for everyone else, which just sucks for everyone else because we were asking about that, and we just didn't get an answer, and then they picked her, and it was okay. So it's just like just fucked for us. But like that was definitely the best draft pick of the entire draft, and it's a leadership oriented thing. But leadership should be prioritized early because you are playing for your bottom 25 to be better, right? So you have to play for that like stronger leadership to build up the bottom 25, not necessarily just have a super heavy hitting top 25 and then hope your other 25 people can kind of hide and not mess up. I don't think that's really realistic. The talent isn't that deep. You have to train people to be better within the event and heavily prioritize builds that can kind of have more solo impact rather than group impact. Like a build with a lot of group impact would be like a what do you call it? Like a fire staff slash like blunderbuss stuff. Like that stuff is like really good if you have the right components around it, but if you're just getting rolled from an army perspective, like blunderbuss isn't going to do anything. Like fire staff won't really do that much. But if you're like even in terms of the ball, then those builds start to open up. And those builds, the problem is those builds tend to have the like the players that are the flashiest slash look the best. So like Reloads goes like really, really early. A very good player. Metritize goes very early. Very good player. Animox goes really early. Very good player. But those builds just don't do as much without the supporting pieces around them. Guanzo Goods made it work because they're able to train their melee to be better, but that would not be possible if you did not have the leadership to actually train people to be better, and that's the main thing that comes from the event and the main thing for the event, right? You're trying to get newer players to get better at the game, and that's something that I don't think many companies prioritized, and we just kind of failed at altogether from a Joe Team 6 perspective. I think we did okay earlier on, but there wasn't like there was no structure to getting better. It was just kind of like you just do random VOD reviews for 100 people and just hope that they magically get better over time. There's a little bit of like kind of presenting like philosophy stuff that I did, but in terms of like how you play the game at a high level, but it was just like not nearly enough for the the people that we had, to be honest. Most rules just are not able to carry if that the if the supporting pieces around them aren't good enough, which is like why you see like grab auto mail, like they go for heavy melee, heavy healer early on. They want the good healers to heal the good melee and then hope for the best. That I think is generally a pretty solid, safe strategy and would totally work if it's not like a leadership diff from Guanzhou. And I think if that didn't happen, Gravana Mail would probably make it to top three if they're in a different group and they would go far. It's just kind of unfortunate from a seeding perspective. They definitely did well with that. Stacking the point felt like the easiest and the most successful cheese strat. There are a lot of companies that kind of had a lot of weird success from it that was not anticipated. Like Criminals had a lot of success just because they would stack the point team. If their point team hard won, which sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't, they would just hard win, which I think is something that we missed on a lot because we went for like a heavily stacked point team, but we didn't play to the strengths of the point team, if that makes sense. Like we tried to play like a meta comp with the squad that we had when we probably should have just played to our natural strengths of our draft and probably prioritized the point more. I think this was a draft that we completely missed on. We missed the testing the idea of doing like a double SNS, like triple bruiser like hard on point team thing, and then you do your quads. So at that point you have 7 people, and then you have like a three kill squad, or you have like a more passive kill squad that just plays to hold space rather than like trying to push into space super aggro, and you just play off winning off your ball. Like that's something that we completely missed on that we definitely could have prioritized based off our draft, but we just I didn't really see it until it was like way too late, and then by the time we realized it was something that we can do, it didn't really feel like we could really accomplish a lot with it just with the hand that we're dealt. Like how are you supposed to play for your point team and diff on point team if you're missing your point bruisers and you're missing your quad healers? Like you just lose. So that's just kind of frustrating to deal with. A Greatsword Disruptor seemed to be the most impactful class of the event, along with like kind of quad melee oriented roles, which is weird because quad melee are typically the spot that gets filled within an army. Just because point is considered to be a little bit harder to play slash live, and especially in the meta that was for this event, which is like Dedo crits ignoring Brazil, which basically made it so that Detonate would just one-shot clumps if you timed it right with people. On top of that, Detonate can double hit, and I'm not going to explain how that is accomplished, but I keep saying that in hopes that AGS will actually fix it, but I don't think that they will. So there's a lot of situations where you just get 100 0'd, you look back at the VOD, and then you see the Dedos hitting you for 4K from one person twice, and you're just like, what am I supposed to do there? Like, there's literally no way to live that at that point. And that's just like a game balance reason. But Greatsword was super strong with this because you can go into Relentless, you get the guaranteed critical, which applies to the Detonate, which ignores Brazil, and then at that point you're just nuking everyone around you. And that combined with like Fire Staff going in was just like overall very strong for just destroying clumps within the event. It felt like the EU meta definitely took over the event. I'm not sure if that's because the EU people that were drafted from a leadership perspective just put in more time and effort, or if it's just generally a easier slash better meta to play overall. Like you see, Soppel doesn't really go for that EU style of meta. They ball up a lot more than EU does. They swing hard from side to side. They do that like kind of Zerg style at times, but they also have their respective spots that they like generally play. And that seems to be better from an NA perspective, but no company really tried to teach from with that kind of philosophy in mind. It felt like every company was running 2 people on or 2 groups on point, 4 quad melee, and then 4 like kill squad slash disruptor oriented builds, which is like very balanced, but it was very one dimensional from a meta perspective, and no one tried to get creative with it overall. It it felt like from this event, melee needed to be like heavily prioritized. Like I think Grav on a mill like kind of did the best with it like early on because this quad melee felt like the most impactful players in the event overall. So like that. But that being said, we would like watch a Cephia VOD like with everyone in VC, and there's just like nothing Cephia could do at times, and like even though like like quad melee I'm saying is very impactful, like it's not like a one man can carry this entire role thing, which is the main problem from a draft perspective is it's a very team oriented game. So single players aren't going to be able to make a big difference, and that's why those leadership spots are probably more important. Like would I draft Cephia in hindsight, or would I draft Naomi first round? I would probably draft Naomi, and that's nothing against Cephia. That's just because leadership is like aspects and training everyone in your army is just far more important than actual gameplay when it comes to winning the event. Uh, there are a lot of problems with like kind of filling where if people wouldn't show up, then you'd want a player that's played a lot to fill that slot rather than slotting a newer player in a build that they've never played before. But then that experienced player would not be able to carry in that role. They'd just be like kind of passable, and at that point, like you're kind of wasting a higher on slot. And that was a problem with filling that we ran into a lot. The alternative strat to like the EU thing would just be like doing a heavy Zerg, so that's like supple oriented, playing off your ball. I think that's something that we should have tried to go for more. People were just generally afraid to bend the rules of the meta. Like you look at like a Spada, for example, who I think are going to do generally well in the event, but they definitely could like play like a very kill squad oriented team, and or like as a kill squad just play around that very well and be very effective. I think my kind of hot take is I don't know if a Spada would do nearly as well in this event if they did not get Everfall. They have Everfall on defense and a heavily stacked kill squad, which just enables the kill squad to do so much more because Everfall just favors the defenders the most out of any map in the game. So, and especially the kill squad perspective. So I think that helps them a lot, but they definitely have played around their strength very well. They did a very good job of drafting like melee higher up in the draft. They got like key healers that could enable their kill squad to play aggro versus like we didn't prioritize healers at all that could enable our kill squad to play aggro, and we like kind of went for healers later on who still got value, but they're not able to like do the same amount of like consistent healing while being pressured that some of these healers are able to do. Like you look at Curio, you look at like Brick, you look at Eckhart, Brick, Curio, Carl, like all these players are able to like consistently heal while being pressured. And that's the thing that separates like the top healers from like the mid healers the most. And that's something that you kind of need from a kill squad to be effective. And that's something that you kind of need for most groups to be effective at a high level, to be honest. Like you look at our wars and you look at like SNS deaths, and we have very high SNS deaths because we aren't able to consistently heal while being pressured because we don't have a stable backline for our healers to play in, so they're not able to consistently heal. But there are some healers that are able to do things in that situation, which I don't think are really explainable, where they're able to consistently heal without being protected. And that's something that like these players have that enable them to be better in that role, and that's something that kind of allows teams to play better if they have people that are able to kind of make those hero plays and enable others while not getting punished because the skill of the server is just a little bit lesser than typical wars. Uh, so, like in general, playing to a strength, I think was the key for a lot of companies to doing well, rather than being the master of none, so to speak. It worked like pretty well for Grab Auto Mail. I think they kind of got messed up by standings and at the end to see how well they would place. Guanzhou just had really good leadership. Uh, Cookout and Joe Team 6, I don't think we really played to a certain strength overall. Mexico definitely played to a strength, but it didn't really work for them at all, mostly because of leadership, in my opinion. Espada played to a strength very easily. Cancun had, like, they did not actually violate TOS, so their players actually got to stay in the event, so they did very well. I definitely underrated them early on because I thought half their players would get TOS'd, so that was on me. Audacity just didn't have a strength. Criminals played to a strength. So like I'd say like half the rosters just played to a certain strength, and overall they did better because of it. There are some rosters that gambled and tried to be good at everything, and just were either able to or just completely missed the mark on everything and lost everywhere. And we were the one of the teams that kind of missed the mark on everything. Guangzhou was one of the teams that made it work. And it was at that point, it's just like a leadership definite. Guangzhou just has better leadership, better teachers than Joe Team 6 had. So, but detonating, ignoring Brazil, I think was the main thing that like kind of made this kind of gross overall in terms of meta standpoint. It's like that old meta from a year ago where Oblivion used to make it so that you could not heal people at all if they were inside of an Oblivion, and besides single targets. And it felt like that all over again, when people just were just getting 100 0'd left, right, and center, even with the best gear in the game, which is a problem with the game itself that needs to be fixed, and did get fixed with Detonate not critting anymore, and it feels a lot better on live than it does with than this patch of the New World for sure. And then getting into like some of the ugly stuff, if you actually look at our draft picks, the first 5 draft picks, only 2 of these players actually played the entire duration of the event. That being said, we did get decent trades for some of the players that dropped out of the event. Like Ace, we got Black Rose, for example, which is like #1 bruiser in NA for #1 bruiser in EU, where Ace is like arguable #1 bruiser in NA. Cephia is very, very good. We had Cephia and Ace as our 2 bruisers that we rated above a 10 scale out of every bruiser in the game. So, uh, like those were our #2 that we're going for overall. But yeah, it's like there's stuff like that where it's just like kind of unfortunate. You just kind of lose your natural synergy. We still think Pakak would have actually went off if his build just didn't get banned from the New World League, which I'm still like actually infuriated about. But then they nerfed it to the ground next patch. I don't think Pakak's gonna play the game anymore. That was the entire reason why he was drafted, and those rules need to be laid out and before the event, in my opinion, so that you don't go for strats like that where you're drafting a player just because they think they're a good pug stomper. Because that was our idea early on, was like who's a good pug stomper who can do well in those kind of events, and Pakak was definitely a player that easily came to mind. Uh, Event was just too long. I think people burned out from every single company. Need to find a way to make this event to last 3 to 4 weeks tops, and the best way to do that is probably just to have like just a round robin. Whoever gets the most points in a round robin like wins the event overall. Like, and not go into it more in depth and then just do another draft from there. Like I don't think it makes more much of sense to go into this postseason thing when it's only going to benefit the experienced players and it's not going to benefit the new players that much. Like in theory, the newer players would have been able to get better and would be able to play in the postseason. In reality, I don't think that to happen to any company. Like there would be 5 to 10 newer players that made it to the postseason, but the reality is that the game is kind of defined from the amount of time that you have in wars. And if you have less time in wars, it's just like not as viable from a slotting perspective later on, which is unfortunate. But it's like just part of the game design and part of the reason why New World needs to have some sort of like activity that makes it so that you can practice wars a lot better than the current systems. I think the problem is that they just do a pug queue, then no one's gonna take it super seriously, and they'll get like ideas for how to play the war in general, but it won't be nearly as competitive. But at least that will be better. And then the other problem is pushing, because the best way to practice is just to have more wars, but pushing is actually miserable, and that overhaul like I think needs to come before another event is proposed if they're gonna do another season of the New World League. I would not do it if they had the current pushing system, to be honest. I'd not play in it again, just because that's just super miserable for everyone involved. Like, I don't think I was a heavy pusher whatsoever, but it seemed like it was just way too much pushing for the amount of wars that were had. Like, there were like maybe 20 real wars or something like that in the event, or maybe not 20, like probably 10 real wars. If you count absences, I think we had like 3 real wars. And then like, so we're basically pushing maybe 4 to 5 times the amount of like real wars that we'd have at that point, and it just was not worth it overall. And I don't think there's a way to really fix that until that there's some sort of like either war queue or kind of like a practice war mechanic where you can just get a practice war scenario versus another company but not have to push. Until that's implemented, I don't think it makes sense to really go forward. And the big thing from New World as a whole, and it was definitely highlighted by this event, is how much a better computer makes a difference with this game, for better or worse, because the amount of kind of resources required to play this game is so high. There were players that were drafted that in theory looked like they would be good. In reality, they just physically couldn't boot up the game and play the game because they consistently crash, and I don't know what you can do about that other than kind of go from an optimization standpoint because the minimum specs required for New World I just don't think are accurate to what is actually needed. So, well, thanks everyone for like listening to the rant if you made it this far, and hope that everyone kind of does well in the playoffs. Seems like it was overall fun for a lot of people, and glad we got to see something different from the PvP perspective. But there's definitely a lot to be worked on if there are going to be future seasons of this event. And with that being said, I'll see you guys all later.